Could psychedelic drugs be the right treatment for the terminally ill? Hey everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is The Right Angle on a new set of studies. I found this thing fascinating, guys. And of course, this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. So I had to get out of the muck this week. You know, all the big stories. And so I asked my wife if she'd been reading anything that would be a completely different angle from what we've been doing lately. And sure enough, she found a report in the Daily Beast, of all places. I don't usually read that myself, on a set of studies on psychedelic mushrooms and LSD as a treatment for depression and anxiety in the terminally ill, who are usually just doped up on opiates and unable to communicate or to receive communications from their loved ones in their final weeks or months of life. And Bill, this isn't just some hippie retread from the '60s saying, "Hey man, we're gonna drop some LSD, it'll be great." These are double-blind experiments done, as I said, with mushrooms and LSD, one or two times on terminally ill cancer patients. And what they found is on these sort of guided trips that these terminally ill patients were able to come to grips with their depression, were able to stave off their anxiety, and instead of spending their final weeks doped up on opiates or even just high on LSD, were able to calmly and alertly accept their fates and enjoy some last time with their loved ones. And of course, there are all kinds of laws complicating this thing, and maybe this is something we should have been doing 50 years ago before LSD came under Schedule 1. Where do you stand between treatment and the law on this one?
The closest I've come to that kind of, face your own mortality depression was twice. Once was in November of 2008. Second one was in November of 2012. Both those nights during Barack Obama's reelection and his election, I opted for the morphine drip when I much rather would have been some kind of a bear cub running around through the forest and snapping up butterflies. That actually was that whole thing was a little beneath me, to be honest with you.
I enjoyed it.
I'm completely in favor of it, and I'm in favor of it for a number of reasons. First of all, I'm in favor of letting anybody do whatever they want to, so long as it's not harming anybody else. So, just on that grounds alone, I'm in favor of it. This is the fear, right? I mean, this is the fear. Everybody who's worried about getting sick or worried about traveling in an airplane or worried about being in an elevator, it all comes down to the fear of dying, and that is the fear. It's connected to pretty much everything. Even things like your finances on some level deeply connect to your fear of dying. If I don't have enough money to pay my bills, then they're going to throw me out on the street and we're going to starve. So finding a way to cope with that fear, I think, is good, especially in the terminal stages of life. Now, with that said, my personal experience has been that the way to deal with that fear is to face it directly and simply understand that this is going to happen. And then the question becomes, what kind of a life will you be able to look back upon? I remember with crystal clarity, like that line from Apocalypse Now, like somebody shot me between the eyes with a diamond bullet.
Oh, yeah.
I just learned to fly gliders. I probably had 5 hours in gliders, and there was a very unusual conditions where it was damp in the Mojave Desert. Wind was coming from the north. I was ridge soaring. As I was flying along the side of the ridge, there was an inverted waterfall of clouds. As the air went up, as the air hit the mountains, it went up, and as it went up, it got colder and condensed, and there's this waterfall of clouds going up and had a wing in it. It got above this layer and below another layer, and the sun setting over the Pacific. It could see the silver plate off in the distance that was the Pacific Ocean. There was a line of gold above me and a line of red below me, and I clearly remember thinking, okay, this is a life. This is a life that a life that could have had this experience was not a wasted life, let's put it that way. Yeah. And I've had many, many experiences like that since then. They all build on each other. I'm not going to tell you I wouldn't wet my pants or anything, but I will tell you I am prepared to die. And there's an enormous amount of comfort in that. If you are willing to look it right in the eye and stay with it, there's a tremendous freedom that comes from that. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And for those people who haven't been able to prepare themselves all their lives, if this does it for them, then I think that's great. But the problem is they've condemned themselves to a life of fear for their entire lives prior to that moment. And it really does come down to, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a brave man only dies once. If you fear your mortality so much, like Woody Allen, for example, where every day is just a simple sucking of all of life's pleasure out of you simply because of this persistent, ongoing dread, then I don't think that's a healthy way to go through life.
Yeah, and just to be clear, they're not keeping people on an acid trip for the last 6 months of their lives. They're giving them acid or mushrooms once on a guided tour, and then finding that up to 6 to 14 months later, these terminally ill patients are still enjoying the benefits of having done these drugs one time.
I'm completely in favor of it.
Yeah, Scott, there's another angle of this, and I'd like to get your take on this. That perhaps you would have people finding comfort in what you might call a false god, instead of finding comfort in the Bible or the Torah. How would you approach this if you were giving somebody advice?
I think there are a lot of interesting aspects to this. I mean, part of me is with Bill, and it reminded me, Bill, when they were saying, okay, I remember the relatives of this elderly woman saying, now, you shouldn't have this ice cream. They were having ice cream. They were like, you shouldn't have this ice cream. It's not, the doctor says it's not good for you. And I looked at him, I'm like, she's 96 years old. Give her the tub and the scoop and let her go to town.
Sit her in or whatever she wants. Absolutely,
right.
yes.
Give her a trough of ice cream and put her hands behind her back and let her wallow in it. I don't care. Just let her have the ice cream. Have a cigarette, whatever you want. At that point. That there's that aspect of it. Whatever a free-thinking person wants to do, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, that's fine. I do think that there's an element also of it made me think of the over-medication of our nation's children, where basically we've got kids that we don't know quite how to help them to deal with the psychological trauma of being an 8-year-old, and so we want to medicate them. And I know I'm going to stir up all kinds of trouble by saying stuff like this. And I used to jokingly say, when I was a kid, ADD was spelled BOY.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think, and we all had a bad case of it. But so there's that. And I don't want to prevent anybody from doing something that they think might make them better. But to a certain extent, I think we're offering false hope. And this gets to your question, Steve. We're offering false hope to basically say to people, look, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're confused, or whatever. And here's the answer. We're gonna use this guided trip to distract your mind from this, and we're gonna take you somewhere else. And then the lingering effects of that may be good for you. I think there was a day in this country when we faced death more frankly. And maybe it was because there was a day when we saw clearly what was on the other side of the abyss, so to speak, and we expected better things.
Death was everywhere. People were just dropping children.
Yeah, and people died in unbelievable numbers from youth. When you see the numbers that say that the average person in the early 1800s only lived to, I'm making up a number here, but 58 years old or whatever, that doesn't mean that old people were only 58 years old when they died. What it means that vast numbers of babies died. And so the overall average was drawn down. There were still guys who were in their 90s, back then, not as many. So I think I don't want government to get involved in this, but I don't want to give people a false sense of, hey, medication is the solution to this. Some sort of hallucinogenic is the way that you're going to get out of this. I think what people really need is other people. And I think that if anything, that's the answer. It's family, it's community, it's faith. It's, for me, it's Jesus.
And one of the points of at least one of these studies is that after receiving this treatment, they were able to enjoy other people simply because they weren't doped up on Dilaudid or Demerol
Well,
or
and
whatever.
given the
whatever it is to get these
alternative,
people.
I mean, if the alternative is laudanum, as William Wilberforce was on, I agree with you there.
Yeah,
It's Dilaudid, by the way. And the reason I'm making that pronunciation correct is because I was in the worst pain I ever had when I was passing a kidney stone, and they gave me, after 7 hours of this, of Tylenol and then even Demerol, when they finally gave me Dilaudid, I said, if I ever have a child, boy or girl, their name's going to be Dilaudid for sure.
well, I don't know if
Say
anybody
eight.
caught it, but Dilaudid was an obscure Steely Dan reference.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wait, Scott, were you trying to throw something in there?
No, it was a bad Brian Regan joke that I was throwing. I mean, I was badly using a Brian Regan joke.
Okay. Listen, folks, I think this study goes to demolish the whole Schedule 1 FDA restriction on drugs. We're doing studies now on the use of ecstasy, MDMA, on veterans suffering from severe PTSD, and it has helped them. We're learning now that psychedelics can help the terminally ill cope and to actually enjoy their remaining time. All sorts of things. Research that has been delayed for decades because of this senseless and stupid war on drugs. So wherever you come down on your own personal use, I think Scott and I would just have to respectfully disagree. I would say this: if I'm spending my last few weeks or months on this planet, I do not want to spend it either in excruciating pain or in a medically induced mental coma of opiates. If there's a chance to spend just a few more hours even with my family, with my loved ones, I'd be willing to take that chance, and I would hope that Uncle Sam would respectfully get the hell out of my way. And that is the right angle on that. Thanks for watching. This is made possible by the members of BillWhittle.com. If you like what you see, click on over, join. We'd love to have you aboard, and we'll see you next time.
I don't want to spend my final hours hearing my loved ones chanting, "Eat the worm."